Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing great at home. Today I'm bringing you the last video of unit number 6. Remember that this unit was about habits and everyday activities. So we're going to start talking a bit about grammar, and we're going to be talking about present simple questions. So in past units, right, and past videos, we have studied present simple positive and negative, and now we're going to focus on how to make questions using present simple. Don't forget that present simple is what we use to talk about habits, routines, things you do every day, and things that are always true. All right? So we're going to start with a listening exercise. It says listen. What are the questions and write them correctly? So here we have 3 examples, right, of 3 questions that we have to create using the words given. So the first word we have in each case is a question word. When, where, how. We have more examples of question words such as what, why, who, how much, and other examples more, right? But these are the ones that we're going to focus today. So we're going to listen and you're going to write complete questions, all right?
Track 13. Excuse me, could I just ask you a few questions?
Yes, okay.
Right, when do you finish work?
At about 4. On Friday, I finish at about 1 or 2.
Okay, and where do you have lunch?
In a cafe, usually. There's a very good cafe near my office, so I usually have lunch there.
Okay, thank you. And how do you go to work?
Well, I go by train, and then I walk. My office is quite near the station.
Okay, thanks very much.
Not at all. Bye.
Okay, so let's see your answers. We have number 1, the question is, when do you finish work? Where do you have lunch? And how do you go to work, right? How do you go to work? Very good. Now, if you pay attention, the order of these questions is always the same. We start first with a question word. In this case, we have when, where, and how. Then we have the auxiliary do or does. In this case, we use the auxiliary do because we're talking about you, right? The subject you. But if we are talking about the subject she, we're going to use does, right? And then we have a verb in infinitive, right? Before that we have the subject, a verb and infinitive, and then the rest of the sentence, what we call the complement. Yes? So this is the kind of formula that you have to follow if you want to create questions in the simple present. The question word, do or does, the subject, the verb, right, like finish, have or go, and then the complement. That would be work, lunch, or to work, right? Depending on the verb is the complement we're going to use. All right? Very good. Now, we're going to continue now. The idea is for you to identify the man's answers, right? So we focus first on the questions and now on the answer. And try to identify what do we know or what does the man says about Friday, the cafe, and his office. All right, so we're going to listen again.
Track 13. Excuse me, could I just ask you a few questions?
Yes, okay.
Right, when do you finish work?
At about 4. On Friday, I finish at about 1 or 2.
Okay, and where do you have lunch?
In a cafe, usually. There's a very good cafe near my office, so I usually have lunch there.
Okay, thank you. And how do you go to work?
Well, I go by train, and then I walk. My office is quite near the station.
Okay, thanks very much.
Not at all. Bye.
Okay, so when does the man finish work? So we say he usually finishes work at about 4. Yes? Remember that we say he finishes, right? But what happens in Friday? He says, but on Friday he finishes work at about 1 or 2, right? Where does he have lunch? He has lunch at a cafe near his office, right? So what do we know about the cafe? That the cafe is near his office. Very good. And how do you go to work? Well, he gets the train and walks, right? And what do we know about his office? His office is near the station, right? So he gets the train and then he walks to his office because that is near. Very good. Now let's continue. Look at these questions and listen. Do you get up at 6? When do you get up? Do you live in London? Where do you live? Do you go to school by bus? How do you go to school? Now, if you pay attention, we have 2 different types of questions. Let's try to answer these questions. So, for example, for the first question, do you get up at 6? We can say, yes, I do, or no, I'm sorry, I don't. Yes? Now, when do you get up is not a question that I can answer by saying yes or no, right? I have to give more information. So in that case, I say, I get up at 6 in the morning, right? Now, do you live in London? The same case. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Where do you live? I live in Valparaiso, right? Where do you live? I live in Valparaiso. Do you go to school by bus? Yes, maybe. I do. No, I don't. Or, how do you go to school? I go to school by car. Or I drive, or I walk, or whatever, right? So if you pay attention, both of these types of questions follow the same structure. Remember that I told you that we have question words, do or does, subject, verb. Now, question words can be omitted. So in the case of, do you get up at 6? We delete that. Do you get up at 6? Do you live in London? Right? So we can omit question words, but the order is always going to be the same, right? So of course we use when to talk about time, where to talk about places, and how to talk about the way in which you do certain things, right? Now, write these questions using with, where, or how, following the examples above. So pause the video and write a different question using, of course, the same information and the question words. All right? So let's check your answers. For number 1, we have, where do you work? We're talking about places. When do you start work? Where do you have lunch? When do you come home? How do you go to work? And then we can have different answers. For these questions, we have more possibilities. But for questions that start with the auxiliary do or does, the only possibilities are yes or no. All right? Now let's continue. So we have the activity, what do you do? How can you answer these questions? What if I tell you, what do you do in the evening? What do you do in the evening? Here we have examples, right? A positive sentence can be I do a lot in the evening, I don't do a lot in the evening, or what do you do in the evening? Remember that this do is the auxiliary and this one is a verb, right? Now, when I say what do you do in the evening, I need examples of things, right? But for these types of answers, I do a lot, I don't do a lot, the question would be, do you do a lot in the evening? Yes, I do a lot in the evening. No, I don't do a lot in the evening, right? Now let's see below. We have some examples of questions and answers. So what I want you to do is to match the answer to the correct question. All right? So pause the video and do the exercise. Okay, so let's see. Number 1 says, what do you do in the morning? The answer would be, I have a shower, then I have breakfast. Remember that then means after, right? So I have a shower and after that I have breakfast. Very good. Number 2, what do you do at lunchtime? A, I usually buy a sandwich and sit in the park. What do you do after work? Number 3, with letter D, right? I usually go home, but sometimes I meet friends. What do you do in the evening? Not much. I usually watch TV, then go to bed early, right? So pay attention that in this case, we're talking about what things do you do. So you have to give examples, right? You cannot say yes or no. That's not enough. Very good. Let's continue. Now here we have something that I'm going to leave you as a homework. Of course, this is optional. So here we have some sets of questions. So this is supposed to be worked in pairs, but of course we're going to do this alone. So what I want you to do is to choose 3 of these groups and answer these questions and submit your answers on the Aula Virtual, right? So for example, A says, when do you get up in the morning? Do you have a big breakfast? What do you do after breakfast? So these questions are about breakfast, right? B is about work or school. When do you go to work? In this case, you can talk about the time, or you can also talk about days, right? For example, I go to work on Mondays, right? Or on weekdays. How do you go there, or do you work from home? At this moment, I think we're all working from home, right? So choose 3 or 4, or you can choose them all if you want, and write complete answers to these questions because we're going to be, I'm going to be checking them on the Aula Virtual. Now, to finish the unit, we're going to do the last part, right, which is the look again section. So remember that these exercises are usually very similar to the ones in previous units, okay? So in the first part, you have to find pairs of words, right? So pause the video and do the exercises because I'm going to be giving you the answers, all right? So let's see. We have the word lunch and breakfast, right? We have a station and airport. We have tram. Remember that this is a type of bus and a bus, right? Finish and start, walk and drive, and never and always. Very good. Now let's see exercise letter B says which word can go in the gaps. So pause the video and try to choose one word that can fit into this sentence. So for number 1, we can say I usually walk to work, or I usually drive to work, or I usually cycle. How can I get to the cinema? How can I get to the hospital? How can I get to the university? Here we include places, right? I start work at 7, or you can also say I finish work at 7. You can go there by taxi, by car, by train, by boat, or any other type of mean of transport. From this case, we're going to say you can go there by tram or by bus, right? Let's have, and here we include a meal, right? Let's have lunch, let's have breakfast, let's have dinner. Very good. Now, adverbs to these expressions. So here we have nouns, right? And you have to write the correct verb. Are you ready? So let's see. For number 1, we have lunch. You can say go to work, walk to work, drive to work, maybe. All of them are correct. Have a cup of coffee. Read the paper. Listen to the radio and go to bed. Did you have them all correct? Now try to answer these questions using very simple sentences, all right? So try to describe how can you get from your home to the center of the town, to the next town, or to London. That would be interesting. How can you get from your house to London? Now let's check some spelling. Here we have some words that haven't been spelled correctly. So identify the mistake and write the correct word. Number 1, we have usually, lunch, breakfast. Number 3 is breakfast. 4 is shower, right? 5, we have expensive and sometimes. Very good. Now look at these things. What things can you buy at a kiosk or a clothes shop? So we have a pair of sunglasses. This is in a clothes shop, right? Number 2. A suit, a clothes shop as well. A newspaper at a kiosk. A tie, number 2. A postcard at a kiosk. A coat, a sandwich, a pen, and this is number 1, I'm sorry. And then a hat, number 2. Very good. Now, if you look here, you have the explanation of the present simple endings, right? Remember that we have for subjects I, you, we, and they, we only use the verb, but for he and she, we have listens, lives, wears, and for some words that end in ch or sh or irregulars, we use es, right? Like watches, goes, finishes, right? Then we have present simple questions. I work in Tokyo. Where do you work? I get up at 6. When do you get up? They go to school by bus. How do they go to school? We also talked about the word can, right? To talk about the possibilities you have to get to a place. So you can get there by plane, and the question form would be, can I get there by plane? Or how can I get there? Right? If you pay attention, this follows the exact same pattern of questions that I mentioned before. Auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. Question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. Now, let's see. Each of these sentences has one mistake, so please correct them using the, of course, appropriate vocabulary. So pause the video and do the exercise. Now let's see. Number 1 says, she start work at 9. So the mistake in this case is in the verb. She starts work at 9, right? Number 2, where do you have lunch? Where do you have lunch? Number 3 is a problem or order. We say, how can I get to the airport? How can I get to the airport? Don't forget to include all the steps of questions. Number 4, the children go to school by bike. Remember that the word children is plural, so we talk about they. The children, they go to school by bus. And by bike, I'm sorry. And then the last one, the film finishes at 10:30. So that is the end of today's video. Remember that in a few more days we have our next test. So if you have any questions about the content, don't forget that you can write me at my email. All right? So that's the end for now. I will see you very soon. Bye bye.